All right. So every day, ChatGPT is making headlines, but many amongst us have no idea what it is, how it works, and what impact it will have on us. Today, we're talking about ChatGPT and its impact on marketing, along with something very important, which is the right mindset for entrepreneurs and innovators, what they need to be successful. And we're with Arielle Shnaidman. Arielle is an executive coach for founders and leaders, as well as just a brilliant product marketing strategist for startups. I am so excited for this conversation. But first, welcome to this week's episode of Make Sense, a video podcast that simplifies complex issues at the intersection of tech and people. And there are a lot of them. So whether you're totally hyped on artificial intelligence and ready for the robot takeover, or you want to crawl into a cave after deleting all of your social media accounts, I'm here with my guest to help make sense of what's going on in the world of tech so you can design yourself into the future. As a reminder, my name is Lindsay. I'm a product market fit strategist and innovation advisor. I've always been obsessed with designing technology for people. So let's get started. Hi, Arielle. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I am so excited to have you. You are an executive coach for founders and leaders for almost 5 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm hoping to pick your brain right now. So I'll tell everyone why I wanted Arielle on the show as soon as possible. I jumped to invite her on to Make Sense when we found ourselves in a LinkedIn post comments, just talking about a concept that Arielle has shared about entrepreneurship, about how it's a personal quest, which kind of makes me think I'm in a video game. I am Mario. Can you describe what you mean by entrepreneurship as a personal quest, and when that kind of advice and conversation comes up for founders, or why it comes up?
Yeah. So if you think about like maybe the old way of thinking when you're in your career, we often were taught and think about it as this upward and to the right kind of linear path where where you're trying to get to is clear, you know where you're at, and when you know those two things, you can kind of just reverse engineer the most optimal path to get there. And certainly there's probably some professions that are still like that, like not to dunk on doctors or anything, but you have very much a path you need to follow to become a doctor. With entrepreneurship, it's very different. There is no optimal path, right? You might have a sense of like a North Star of where you're trying to move towards, but the steps.
It's a big zigzag of a line, right?
Right? You're not walking a path.
No.
You're embarking on a quest. And I like to say it's a personal quest. And if you think to any story, Disney movie, whatever, they're always about a quest. And like with any quest, it's not up and to the right. It's filled with twists and turns, ups and downs. You're always moving towards this North Star, right? But the way you get there is not carved out for you.
No.
And it's sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You have suboptimal outcomes or failures or lessons, as I like to call them. But even those types of setbacks, if you will, the lessons you gain from those quote unquote failures are mission critical in helping you create something better than you could imagine.
Right.
And so you're embarking on this quest. And when you have the mindset of a quest rather than this linear path, you're much more accepting of suboptimal outcomes or failures. And you can better recognize how you're going to leverage those to actually move you forward.
Yeah.
And so much of entrepreneurship is mindset, right? Yeah. The grit, resilience. And so that's why I think of it like a personal quest. To a call you can't refuse.
Right. Oh, but I love that. I love how you keep putting failures in quotes, because I think anyone that's been self-employed, entrepreneur, founder, understands that failures are really just learning lessons.
Yeah.
But in the very early stages, when you have your first couple failures, they can be devastating.
Yeah. Well, here's something that I think you'll like, given, as a product market fit strategist. So, what differentiates failures from lessons is, as long as you're running tight experiments with quick feedback loops, there is no failure. There's lessons. Failure would be, you make the same mistakes over and over again. There's no insights, there's no learning. You're not running experiments where you can analyze what results you were able to produce. That is just a net loss.
Yeah.
So this idea of experimentation, which is pushing you forward along this quest, is key to be able to make a quote unquote failure a lesson.
Yeah. So one thing I talk about with entrepreneurship as well is that it's the quickest path to self-discovery, because there's plenty of people, and this is why the stat is like most founders give up after the first or second year, is that like those early failures become debilitating and you're done. Right. And that's why a lot of people tap out after 1 or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are willing to step up to the plate for the next challenge, and there will always be a next challenge, that thing that's a challenge is likely one part of it that makes it complex is fear, right? Whether it's imposter syndrome and fear of failure, fear of putting yourself out there and getting rejected, fear of actually not having the right skill set or not being able to control the outcome, whatever it is. And so entrepreneurship, like if you're always on the edge of fear, you're always growing. Right. And so entrepreneurship is a constant state of being on the edge of fear. And so if you're willing to face each of those fears, then that's your quickest path to really growing as a person, right? Is entrepreneurship, because you're always kind of scared and you have to keep going if that's what you really want.
Totally. I love that you said edge of fear, because that's actually, I use the term edge work with my executive coaching clients.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
It's when you walk to an edge, right, where there's fear, doubt, whatever it is, that's actually, and you feel that resistance, that's actually where the work is. That's what you need to lean into. And these edges, if you will, I like to think of them like thresholds, right? There's this, and thresholds are really just something people, but even more importantly, entrepreneurs, you need to be able to move through these thresholds if you're going to create something better than you can imagine, something you really want. And there are a few different thresholds or these edges. You describe it as fear, but there's this, okay, what is fear? Well, there's a silliness threshold. So a fear of looking dumb or stupid. There's this knowledge threshold. So the fear that I don't know enough to get started. Or it could also play out like, I know too much. Here are all the reasons why this isn't going to work. That's also a knowledge threshold. There's like trust thresholds. So not trusting that things are going to work out for the best, whatever the outcome. There's sanity thresholds, which this is typically what you see when people will self-sabotage. So this fear that if I actually get successful, this next level of success, it's going to blow up my life, my schedule. I'm going to lose my mind. And these are all kind of, subcategories, if you will, of this larger umbrella threshold, which, I call the love threshold, which is really the fear of being, that I'm not going to be accepted, respected, admired, that I'm not going to be lovable, whatever. Very human thing that we all grapple with, but it's definitely something entrepreneurs need to be able to move through if they're going to create what they really want. And like you said, entrepreneurship is the quickest path to personal development, because all your bullshit is revealed and you're forced to look at these things in yourself that you maybe could hide from before or weren't as present in your life. And so, it really holds up the mirror.
Yeah. So I want to reveal my personal bullshit in this next part of the conversation, because what really, the second thought about having you on to talk about the personal quest and the entrepreneurship is that I was hesitating to kick off Make Sense. And the concept behind Make Sense, this video podcast, has been percolating and on my idea board in different ways for well over 3 years. And I thought maybe you could talk me through like what the hesitations was. I think it's a sanity threshold, but it could be like totally other things. Now I did break through and push to record this first one, so I'll tell you where I was and what I was thinking, and maybe you can ask some probing questions. I know you like to demonstrate and expose everyone to executive coaching, so I think this is a great opportunity to share with others what this might look like. Okay, so this idea for Make Sense, simplifying issues at the intersection of technology and people, has been around for at least 3 years. I was brainstorming in December of 2019, several different video podcast series, but I really struggled to see how any of them fit into my existing business at the time, which I was very much still developing and growing. Labs, my program, product market fit for pre-seed startups. So I couldn't quite connect, or justify a marketing spend in these types of conversations, because I didn't see how it would drive growth of my business, which at the time I think is a totally reasonable thought to have, regarding like connecting what you want to sell, or like what you're selling, to like your marketing at the top of the funnel. But then it became apparent over the past few months, as I've been writing and pursuing the creation of Mandate, which is a scripted comedy drama based on the early years of my career in Silicon Valley, it became clear that the more kind of IP I could create around my stories and what I was bringing into Mandate, like the better it's going to be for me going forward. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden there was almost like a feeling of just like total elation that this concept now made like real sense within the big picture. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that was in December. January comes. It is on my goal list to get this going in February. But I got so much going on with my product and UX consulting. And I actually had a few calls with producers for Mandate that I was like, do I have the time to even add this thing? Right. And I already knew like it's going to be hard to put some gas under it at the beginning, but having these conversations with people was really important for me, just my intellectual pursuit for Mandate. And it was also like a reason to connect, and that's good business as well, right? But I still was like, it was like having a spoonful of chocolate pudding and being like, I can't put it in my mouth. Can I handle this? And that's when I was like, okay, I'm gonna invite the first 4 or 5 people to record, and Arielle needs to be one of them, because I'm scared that I don't have the time, or I won't be able to handle this new addition to my schedule.
Yeah, well, that's definitely sanity threshold. The other thing that maybe stood out to me was, you're working on labs. It wasn't clear how this podcast would add to that. When I think of like the levels, we have like our inner game and our outer game. Our inner game is like our essence, our identity, our beliefs, our values. And then you can think of your outer game as like your behaviors, the environment you're in, et cetera. It sounds to me a little bit like maybe your vision in your inner game, you weren't seeing how this also aligned with your larger vision. And so if you can't figure that out, the internal motivation to move it forward isn't entirely clear. So it sounds to me like you had this kind of aha moment where like, no, this actually is going to create like potentially something better than I can imagine. And then that gave you kind of the internal motivation. And then, with sanity threshold stuff too, we often think, all the things, big picture, but really when it comes to taking action, what I like to tell people is what's the smallest domino you could knock over, right? Like,
I love
not
that.
not the next 10 dominoes, like, not your 6-month plan, but what's the first smallest, biggest action that you could take that you can't fail at?
Right.
The smallest thing you can do where you can't fail and see what happens, right? What results does that create for you? What momentum, what energy? And then you take those insights and you go to the next domino.
I love that. Smallest, biggest action. I'm actually writing that down. I wrote down a bunch. Could you describe like again, what you said, the inner world, what'd you say, the inner world and the outer world, or the inner motivation?
Yeah, inner game and outer game.
Inner game, outer game.
I'm sure other coaches probably have similar, maybe slightly different names for it, but pretty much we have our inner game, which is what's going on within us. So it's like your essence, which is I define as your natural way of being and adding value in the world that requires little to no effort. You've got your vision, your identity, how you see yourself, your beliefs, your values. That's really the core of what makes up your inner game.
Yeah.
And then your outer game is external. So the actions or behaviors you have, the environment you're in, work, people, home, whatever it is. And both the inner game and the outer game, you can think of each of these things I listed as like levers you can pull to create change. So, what might we be able to create if we shifted your identity? Or what might we be able to create if we, in your outer game, like shifted your environment? One is not necessarily better than the other when it comes to inner game or outer game. The way I like to explain it is we have a lot more control in shifting our inner game, whereas there can be constraints on what we can do with our outer game. And also, you and I could have a coaching conversation. We could shift something in your inner game, like your identity, in an instant, and it could change everything, right? It could change your results, how you show up very quickly. Whereas sometimes when you want to make changes to the outer game, like, changing a behavior or a habit, changing the environment you're in, that can take more time, more effort, more. Yeah. So it's not that and sometimes life calls for making changes to the outer game. It's just inner game. There's a lot, I find there's more juice, if you will, to create bigger impact.
Yeah, for sure. It reminds me, and I think you know this about me by now, but I like referencing Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a way to probably in the inner game, outer game crosses both, in that there's certain outer things that we need to make sure are tight, right? Our sense of security, our resources, our loved ones, food, water, air, whatever. Like we need to create those baselines. The inner game comes like, especially as we like move up the pyramid to creativity and self-actualization. And I know from my own journey, kind of building more of my own inner game, is that you can only go so far up the pyramid before you need some type of kind of gratitude and like positive mindset, so that you realize that those bottom tiers of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs are covered. Right. So if you are always have a scarcity mindset, working on your inner game to appreciate all the things that you actually have around you that are setting up a condition for you to thrive, can really help you grow up that pyramid. So totally. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
No, it totally does. It totally does. And I think going back to this concept of, we were talking earlier with like personal entrepreneurship is a personal quest, failures as lessons. And with you just mentioning gratitude, I think a mentor of mine, Robert Ellis, said this to me, shared this with me, which is gratitude for the good things that happen to you is the beginner's practice, and gratitude for the bad things that happen to you is the advanced practice.
Nice.
And so
I like that.
Yeah, and I think that really carries some weight, especially in entrepreneurship, but and in life, right? Even from the bad things, what are the insights? What are the lessons?
So I think this is a good, actually, I think the inner outer game is a good segue to one of the topics I wanted to talk to you about. 2022 was a big year for a lot of bad actors in tech. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, we can go, Elizabeth Holmes, right? There's an idea in the startup world and the tech world that this tech CEO is some hero that is going to bring in some positive version of the future, right? They're the face of innovation and they are bringing in the future. And, internally in the Silicon Valley and tech world, leaders have to have a vision of the future in order to galvanize, new users and partners and investors. But those kind of big egos, larger than life personalities have become, in popular culture, like outside of Silicon Valley, became a symbol of the future. And now everyone wants to kind of cringe when they think about those leaders. And I was curious from your perspective with founders, how the pressure to be like a visionary or to even compare yourself to the level of visionary that, Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or, going back to the Google founders, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, they had to take on those roles. And I'm curious how that affects the everyday founder, right? The founder that is creating something amazing. Do they feel like they need to step into a role like that? Do you find that people have some pressure to be on performance like that?
I think well, first of all, my first comment is putting anyone in the category of hero makes them one-dimensional. No person is just a hero. We can all be victims. We can all be villains. We're not one-dimensional. Certainly, yeah, stepping into a leadership role, I guess what I like to say is at different stages of your startup or your company, it's going to require different things from you. Sometimes what it requires of you will feel like your zone of genius, what you're more in line with your essence, your natural way of being and adding value that requires little to no effort. And sometimes what your company will require from you is edge work, right? Mm-hmm. Being into an edge that is uncomfortable or unfamiliar. If you're starting a company to be a hero or to be admired, I think it can put a lot of pressure on you and end up making it, a quest that's not one you want to embark on because it's externally motivated. Right? The call you're answering isn't an internal call. It's this call for respect, admiration, clout, whatever you want. But when you're internally motivated, your vision is aligned with a mission that's bigger than you. I haven't, at least with my clients, I haven't worked with people with these ideas of grandiosity where they're trying to become the next Mark Zuckerberg, whatever. They're much more focused on what's my own leadership style, right? Based on that, whatever gaps, everyone has their own leadership style. And with every leadership style, there is gaps.
Right.
And once I understand about myself, what people do I need to bring in, as a in the C-suite or whatever it is to help me fill the gaps that I have to build a strong unit.
Yeah. Your clients sound far more evolved. I get a lot of people coming to me that, throughout my career, when I say, hey, we should talk to your customers, find out what they need, what they want, and what they'll pay for, they will just call on, Henry Ford or Steve Jobs and say that neither of them talk to their customers, which is a lie. Different story, check my YouTube channel. But they fashion themselves
Yeah.
that their influence and their expectations for what they're going to build meet those two men, which are only two of millions who have founded things, invented things, and built companies.
Well, again, I have a limited data set, but what I will say about my clients is I'm very selective of who I work with, and I probably wouldn't work with someone who,
Right. Well, yeah, that person doesn't have the internal know-how or self-awareness to know that they need coaching. They see me as an opportunity to get their stuff built and make them money. And so I get them a lot that way, and I have to burst their bubble very, very quickly.
Things, right? We can all borrow, like Steve Jobs, an amazing storyteller, very charismatic.
Sure. He's a great ad man, salesman kind of thing, pitch man.
Right. But again, it's this thing of looking at people like they're one-dimensional or not looking at the whole scope of reality. It's like, okay, I don't think they spoke to customers, or, they did things this way. This is how they did things. Like, you don't actually know the things. You don't know the intricacies of what went on in the company. So yeah, not putting people in these one-dimensional categories.
Right. I hear you. So I do always like to hit something technical, and you did have some insights to share with me around ChatGPT as well as artificial intelligence and how it would impact your product marketing from your product marketing perspective, how it impacts marketing. But let's first start with, what is your simplest definition of or explanation of what ChatGPT is?
Oh God. My simplest definition is ChatGPT is a thought partner.
Thought partner. Okay. Can you get more specific than that?
Yeah. This is maybe what leads me into like ChatGPT and marketing. I don't know if you're on Twitter or whoever's on Twitter, this is like the topic of the day and people have hot takes. Some people are like, this is all BS, it's overhyped. And other people are like, this is going to change the world. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. The way I've used ChatGPT is for work that I'm already doing. It helps me do it a lot faster. Whether it's thinking through ideas or refining messaging or copy, I can talk to ChatGPT, as if it was a colleague or something, and continue to iterate and refine real time based on whatever prompts I'm giving it. So the way I see it is it's arming people who already have certain knowledge, skills, and expertise to do their work even faster and more effectively. That's not to say it can't replace jobs down the line or, take over, but at least in the interim, that's how the people in my circle at least have been using it and what I've seen people been able to do with it. And I think it's great.
So I'm going to bring it down to a very literal description for anyone that hasn't yet even just played with the interface. ChatGPT, if you go to it, is a chat interface. Very similar to any of the customer support chat interfaces where, you can type a question. Now if you're doing that on like United.com's website, they're going to really constrain you to only talking about planes and flights and your account with them. ChatGPT, though, it's like you can decide where you start the conversation in the chat. My first interaction was just to go to it and ask it something that I would ask Google, which is, can you give me a template for writing a recommendation for someone for graduate school? Like that, I was writing a recommendation for a former intern. And so I just put that in there. Now, this is something I've done before. Then I've just gone straight to Google. So you could take whatever your next search is for Google, and instead of going to Google, open up ChatGPT and put your search terms in there. You could put it as terms, or you could format it as a question. I've been formatting my Google search stuff as questions for a very long time, so it was quite natural for me to do it. And it did exactly what Google would do, except skipped a few steps. So if in Google I would type, give me a template, and I'd have to go through a few links to find the actual template that, is like, dear whomever it may concern, this is my recommendation for insert name, whatever going on. I enter in ChatGPT, give me a template, and it responds, spitting out the exact template instead of me having to go through multiple pages to find an answer, right? So I imagine, Arielle, that if you are writing an article and you already have a baseline of what you're writing, entrepreneurship is a personal quest, you could maybe ask ChatGPT, like, how do you think entrepreneurship is a personal quest? And it might come back with some paragraphs.
Yeah, like you can
Is
almost
that
have,
literally like how you would use it to write content? Could you give us an actual example of a
yeah,
marketing activity where you use ChatGPT?
yeah, I'm thinking more with like product marketing and doing work with startups. It's like, okay, like typically in product marketing, you're doing a lot of work to come up with like positioning and messaging, depending on like, I tend to work a lot with SaaS companies. And then, you do all that work and then it comes time to, okay, they're launching a new product. You have to create a product page. And sometimes getting started with that copy can be a bit of like a brain, I don't know, it feels like you're wringing out a sponge.
Yeah.
My experience with ChatGPT is it's like a catalyst or a jump start. You can give like, okay, here's the like product description we came up with in the workshop. What are some, based on what I share with this, what are some key benefits? How could I word these? Or how would you further refine, like, what's a simpler way to say this description, right? So it's helping me refine work we've already done. It's helping me cut out or block out certain benefits or value props that maybe we already had, but they're more tightly refined. Or taking into account maybe what's already on the website, or maybe even some competitors who are also in that vertical. And that's why I say it's really like a thought partner. It's certainly by no means doing the work for me, but it's helping me like, brainstorm faster and get ideas and insights that I can then riff on and refine.
Yeah.
It makes it go faster.
Yeah, it's totally easier to respond to things. It spits out a bunch of different value propositions, and who knows how many of those you could actually run with, but they give you ideas for how to refine it more.
Yeah, like if you think about how this work is done in the past, at least with me, it's a lot of it's happening in Google Docs, and then there's a ton of people giving their thoughts and comments and suggestions. Whereas here, you're getting all that kind of real time with someone. I'm already calling it a someone with something. With something that just has a much larger breadth that it can access rather than it just goes faster.
This is the future that you want, Arielle. This is the future you want.
Like a little robot thought partner. I don't know.
A little robot thought partner. That's what we should go with. ChatGPT is just a little robot thought partner.
Yeah.
Here it is. So I saw that, I guess, over finals in December, a lot of students use ChatGPT to write essays and stuff like that. And I there's two things I have is one, is it like any other technology tool, like garbage in, garbage out? Like if you gave them a garbage product description, is it gonna help you write a better one or help you figure out the like better value propositions? Or if I give it a garbage product description, likely whatever it comes back with is going to be quite garbagey too.
I don't think it's entirely garbage in, garbage out. Um, it's more, again, it's not just using what you give it, it's pulling from other things. So my experience, I mean, I don't think I've ever just messed around with it, putting in garbage. Well, actually, even like my brother-in-law has played with this and like put in garbage and then like written letters to me and my husband with it. And you could say he put in garbage, but the letters that were written were very articulate, even though there was kind of garbage put in.
Okay.
Jokes.
Okay. So students like could potentially get a better paper out of ChatGPT than they could write themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I haven't done this myself. I heard about this. I've obviously not tried to write a whole paper in ChatGPT, but let's say, anytime you're writing a paper, it's like, okay, I want to talk about this. What should my main, paragraphs or, discussions be or arguments? Okay, what are some counter arguments? So I'm not thinking like it's going to write the whole thing for you. I mean, maybe that's how people are doing it, but I'm thinking about it more as how can it help me think more strategically or understand the things I might otherwise miss to make this stronger. I certainly think people completely, I mean, I read about this, people completely plagiarizing, they did some type of work throughout the semester and then all of a sudden their final paper is like amazing. And the profs are like, I know they didn't do this, but it's not.
It's interesting because in when I started college at University of Virginia in 2001, we have a very, very rigorous honor system. And at the time, it was the same scandal. Some professor had been able to write a piece of code that caught like 100 students in some 400 person, like 101 class, 100 some students who had all plagiarized. So the problem isn't new, right? There's opportunistic students everywhere and at every time period. But I thought that the CEO of OpenAI's response was interesting, which was students got calculators and we figured out a different way to like teach math. So do you think that is a fair analogy?
I think so. I mean, human beings at the end of the day, it's not that we're lazy. I mean, yes, we can be lazy, but we're always looking for shortcuts. We're always looking how to do things faster. Now, this technology now exists. To say this technology exists and you'll be using this in the real world and in real life, but you can't use it in college or school, I think is a disservice. I think I was reading or listening to something where, okay, now this technology exists, it's here to stay. Maybe we'll go back to what we did in the 19th century, which was like oral arguments and discussions rather than written papers. So yeah, that's kind of on par with like, okay, we're going to change the way we do math or change the way we measure how someone, comprehends a certain thing. I don't think blocking it out of universities is the correct thing. I think it's rather, how can we test different things?
Yeah. It reminds me of then in, 2005, 6, and 7, when I was in graduate school, we weren't allowed to use Wikipedia as a bibliographic source for any of our essays because it was, not of a certain standard. I think that has changed since.
Has it?
I have no idea. Maybe if there is a student listening to this, they can put it in the comments and let us know if that has changed. But
because anyone can edit Wikipedia. It's not a stop.
Right.
We all go and Google and look at things on Wikipedia.
Right. Right. But in the real world, we're using Wikipedia to reference things all the time. So in school, should you not be able to reference those?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess academia is different.
Yeah.
Trying to get quick.
All right, we'll end it there. But if academia is different, then should they use ChatGPT, right? So this is like, these are the decisions, these are the conversations that we have to.
Imagine they figure out how to use ChatGPT to like, I mean, I don't have a PhD, but I know when you get your PhD, you have to like argue your
Yeah, you have to
dissertation.
do an oral. Yeah.
Imagine you just start doing that with a like chatbot or ChatGPT. I don't know. I think they should use it in academia. I mean, it's here, it's in the real world. It's weird to me to separate academia and like school rules and whatever with like what's practical and real in the real world.
I get that. I get that for sure. I think if we go back to ChatGPT and the concept of it being, being able to write a paper and it clearly being plagiarized, you still have to rely on your personal individual intellect to make sure that the paper makes sense. It reads well. Also, and that the arguments are correct, because there's still a chance that the arguments could be totally incorrect, or very inappropriate for the assignment that you were given. And I think on top of that, your writing style is actually a fingerprint in itself, right? An identifier. So if you plagiarize it totally outright, you definitely can get caught by a teacher if they've seen your other writing.
Totally. I think, I mean, this was already true with the internet, and now it's just becoming even more apparent with ChatGPT, which is, I think it's much more about the questions you ask rather than the answers. And this is like, I think where it aligns with coaching. Less interested in the answers and outcomes, more interested in the questions and the process. And I think if we can continue to, ask really, those who ask better questions are going to get better results from ChatGPT. So it's really about teaching people like how to be more curious, how to ask more, better, insightful questions.
And those are skill sets that you need, as a critical thinker and analytical thinker anyway. Right. All right, Arielle, this has been awesome. Well, the one thing we did make sense of with ChatGPT is that it is a robotic thought partner. And
It won't come for me. I don't know. I know it's not a robot, it's AI.
we also talked about entrepreneurship as a personal quest, living on, what did you call it? Doing the edge work, living and pushing our own boundaries. Also working on our inner game as well as the outer game. And I love just breaking down what's the smallest, biggest action that you can take. Not think too much about where Make Sense is going to be in a year from now, but just, one more recording, one more invite, and building it on from there. So thank you for listening to Make Sense with me, your host, Lindsay Tabus, and my guest, Arielle Shnaidman, executive coach and product marketing for SaaS and startups. If you want to continue to be the smartest person in the room, hit the subscribe or follow button so you get next week's episode. So I'm definitely in the early days with this, and every subscriber on YouTube, specifically YouTube, makes a huge difference. As always, check out all the links and resources in the show notes. Before I totally sign off, Arielle, where can people find you? Where do you hang out the most online?
LinkedIn is probably best. And I have my website, arielleshnaidman.com, which is actually going through a rebrand. So I'll have a new name soon. But it's best to connect with me on Twitter @ashnaidman or on LinkedIn.
Great. So that's all for this episode. Catch up with you all next time. Thank you so much, Arielle, for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay.